Hi everyone, I'm Eric Allenson. I am the Cooperative Education Advisor for Information Technology at the University of Cincinnati. I am going to take some of your time today to show you how to draft and create an IT co-op resume. So on your screen right now, what you'll see is an example of an IT co-op resume from an actual student at the University of Cincinnati, which I've adapted a little bit for purposes of this example. One of the things you'll notice just basically from an initial aesthetic standpoint is that your resume should ideally be one page in total length. Now when you're first starting out and you have limited experience within your industry, it isn't necessary to create a really long or in-depth document that has multiple pages worth of content from high school and service trips and things that you've done with your church. That's all well and good. However, the reality is, from the standpoint of our employer partners and the recruiters that we work with, they want to see about a single page document of your qualifications. So one page is ideal. I would say it should not be anything shorter than a page. So you should be able to fill one page of this document entirely with content. Now that is your job to aesthetically align the content, choose the font size and the style that that best fits for this resume. Um, but what I will do today is actually show you kind of an overview of how you could design an effective IT resume. So just starting here, one of the things you should do initially at the very top of your document, and this could be either in the header setting in Microsoft Word if you're utilizing that program, you can create a header, or you can actually list your name in the actual body of the document, assuming it doesn't take up too much space. Now your name should not start about a third of the way down the page, because that just leaves a pretty hefty amount of blank white space. And any blank open white space on a resume has the association of the document being incomplete from the perspective of employers. So you want to make sure that this single page document is very filled and robust in terms of the content you provide. So first, you want to list your name. Your name can be in a slightly larger font if you'd like. In this iteration of a resume, we have it centered at the top of the document. You could right align it if you like that style better. That's perfectly okay. And then you want to list your information, including your location. So it could be your permanent address at home if you're commuting from home. It could be your campus address, whatever you feel most comfortable with. But your location, I recommend obviously including your email address, and your email address should ideally be a University of Cincinnati email address, since you're a part of the UC co-op program that helps employers understand where you're coming from, and you're not just a random individual applying for a job. You're actually someone associated with the School of Information Technology at the University of Cincinnati. So I would list that email address here. And then finally, you should list your appropriate contact phone. I would say if you're uncomfortable with a certain phone line that you have, maybe it's your parents' phone or your home phone or something, make sure that you list the phone that is that you check most regularly, and something that is personal to you. So if you have a cell phone, I would recommend including that phone number here. And then the final thing I did, just from an aesthetic standpoint, again, I just created a line strike under this to kind of separate the actual header of the document with your name, your contact information, your location. I just separated that from the actual body of the document with this line strike here, and I think aesthetically that looks rather pleasing. So I've left it as such. Now, moving down to the actual body of the document, once you have your header created, I think the first and one of the most important things you can list is your education. Now, with education, I've seen a lot of students actually list their high school education first. I don't think this is a good thing for you to do. I would recommend not listing your high school information as the first piece of information under this category. And the reason is the reality would be, from an employer standpoint, your high school information for the most part is irrelevant. It's something that occurred in the past. It's also implied because of the fact that you attend the University of Cincinnati. There's an implication there that you actually graduated from high school, so they don't need to necessarily verify that. They assume that's already taken place. So if you'd like to include it, I recommend having it as the second education category, but not the first. So that being said, we're structuring this reverse chronologically, so that meaning the most recent piece of education first, which is the University of Cincinnati. So I've listed the University of Cincinnati, the location of that in Cincinnati, Ohio, and then I've listed and actually right aligned on the document your anticipated graduation. So in this particular example, the anticipated graduation is spring 2018. That's important from the perspective of our employer partners, so they can kind of determine how many co-op terms likely you would be available to work prior to actually graduating. And that can also help them understand, if you're initially a co-op employee, what the time frame would be if they were to offer you a full-time job, which a lot of our employers like to use the co-op program to help facilitate. So again, University of Cincinnati, location, Cincinnati, Ohio. Your anticipated graduation is right aligned on the document, and the reason I've right aligned it is just another aesthetic trick. It helps balance out the document for you. It balances out your content, so everything isn't just pushed on the left-hand side here, which it could easily be. But again, we're not wanting employers to create any type of association that your document is blank. And again, white space, open white space on a resume in any portion of it looks incomplete, and we don't want to convey that message at all. So I've just used this aesthetic trick and right aligned anticipated graduation here on the right hand side. Then I would say under University of Cincinnati, I recommend listing the degree that you're actually pursuing. So all of you in IT are pursuing a Bachelor of Science degree in Information Technology or IT. So I recommend listing it as such. Bachelor of Science first, that is the actual degree name you're going to be receiving. Information technology, and then the abbreviation IT, only because IT is so often keyword searched by employers. It's important to have that keyword on your resume somewhere, and this is an easy place to put it. And then what I've done is I've actually right aligned and created your grade point average here on the right hand side. My recommendation for GPA on a resume is, if your GPA is above a 3.0, your GPA should always be listed. Most of the time, if employers have criteria for screening student GPAs, their cutoff is at the 3.0 mark. So anything above a 3.0 is completely appropriate to include. However, I recommend abstaining and not actually including your GPA if it is below that 3.0. Then finally, under this education, what we've done is I've actually created a concentration category. So for all of you and currently within the School of IT, there are 3 undergraduate concentrations you can pursue. So cybersecurity is one of them. So in this case, we've listed cybersecurity. You could also list networking and systems, as that is one of the appropriate concentrations as well, or software application development, depending on the track that you are pursuing. Okay, so one of the other just aesthetic things I'll note is the fact that you'll notice all of this content with relation to the University of Cincinnati is single-spaced. It's single-spaced in an intentional format because it's all information that's related to UC. Now what I've done here aesthetically is I've actually created a gap or just a space here to separate your UC education from your high school education. And you should do the exact same thing. So this document shouldn't read like an APA, MLA formatted double-spaced document throughout. All related content together should be single-spaced, and then use a space to actually separate content that relates to a different situation or a different category entirely. Okay, so here this individual chose to include their high school information, so we've included that here: the name of the high school, the location, the graduation that occurred in May of 2013, and then optionally, you can do this if you'd like, any advanced placement coursework, particular classes that you took in high school, if you'd like to convey those on your resume, you can. It's not required. But AP coursework tends to have the association of you being a high achiever, you having a strong intellectual and critical thinking mindset, and that's a good thing, I think, to convey to employers. So you can absolutely include that if you'd like. And then finally, your high school GPA, again, right aligned on the document to help balance the document out from left to right. So after education, I would say we're entering what I consider to be the most critical component of a strong IT resume, and that is conveying your appropriate computer and technical skills. This is huge. This is probably the single most important category that will help determine whether or not you get an interview with an employer based on a resume review. So the reason I've created computer and technical skills as the category is because anybody, regardless of profession, regardless of experience, will have some type of skills section on their resume. And it could be very basic skills that they possess, and often it doesn't relate to computers. Because you're in a highly technical and rigorous degree program, it's important to convey that your skills are beyond just generic skills. They're actually computer skills. They're technical skills. So we want to make that very, very apparent to our employer partners. So I recommend listing your category and labeling your category as this, computer and technical skills. Now, what I've done here, and my recommendation for all of you, is to sub-categorize your computer and technical skills. So some examples of the subcategories I've helped include in this resume example would be operating systems, programming languages, system software, and networking. Some other potential subcategories you could include would be hardware. If you know how to build and repair computers, you could have a subcategory related to hardware. If you have experience with customer service and you're comfortable dealing with people, believe it or not, that's a really, really highly desirable skill set from the perspective of our employers. So I would recommend including customer service or help desk and support, something along those lines, as a subcategory, and labeling that and speaking to it in this section. So essentially, the sky's the limit in terms of the subcategories you include. It should just be conveyed in a way which best highlights your particular computer and technical skills that you possess. So for operating systems, as an example, what I did here is I listed strong familiarity with Windows OS, Mac OS, Linux OS. So you could do the same if you would like. Programming languages, I know as a result of your curriculum you gain exposure to languages such as Java, JavaScript, HTML, C#, CSS. Depending on the number of classes you've taken, chances are you'll have some exposure to these. If you're worried about labeling this as a programming language, HTML, you can make a separate subcategory that says markup languages. It's completely up to you. However, I think from the standpoint of most of our employers, they're fine just lumping it into a general programming languages subcategory here. System software. I would include any type of relevant software that you have some exposure to. So for instance, AutoCAD, if you took a CAD class in high school, or maybe you started in the engineering program before transitioning to IT, this would be fine to include. Photoshop is fine. SQL, NetBeans, Dreamweaver, things that you've had in your IT courses, perfectly okay. And then obviously, I think this is the most obvious one, Microsoft Office. And with this being said, I would say nearly everybody in any profession nowadays is expected to have some exposure to Office and be somewhat competent in it. So you can definitely include it on there, even though there's a potential implication that you already have experience using Microsoft Office. But I would showcase the specific program or the specific software packages that you have some experience to. For instance, Access, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. I wouldn't make this a priority, but I think it's perfectly fine to include on an IT resume. And then networking, just another example here, strong knowledge of computer networking, components and functionality. You could also say experience with hubs, routers, switches, the ability to build a local area network, for instance, things that you've done in your IT classes. So again, just to highlight this section will really make the difference for you in terms of opening the door for potential interviews. So this needs to be at the top of your resume, either as a first category or as a second category. I don't care either way. I would say computer and technical skills and education are interchangeable in terms of priority 1 or 2. So in this particular case, this was our second category down, but I've made it very easy for employers to understand the subcategories associated with this, and then the various computer and technical skills that the candidate possesses. So you should do the same thing. Make sure this is a very, very robust document or a component of your document with a lot of content speaking to the strengths that you have in this category. Now, I would say probably the next thing, and probably the third thing in order of importance on an IT resume, would be your work experience that you have. So this is just a very generic example. I would mention a lot of students, probably first and second year, don't have a lot of industry-related relevant work. That's okay. If you've had a job in the past, there are often transferable skills that you can convey on a resume, and employers will be interested in. So I recommend including those. So I've just labeled this category in the exact same format that I did through the previous two, and this is work experience. And I've started off by labeling the actual title of the work position. So in this case, the individual is a youth soccer game official, also known as a referee. But I would say youth soccer game official sounds a lot more important and a lot more formal than just listing referee. So I recommend being overly formal whenever you have the chance. Again, to follow the right alignment format I've used throughout and to balance the document, I've listed the term of employment as well here. Now, moving down a little bit further, I have the actual organization that this individual participated with. And in this case, it's the United States Youth Soccer Association. If you worked at a Hilton hotel or something, or you worked at McDonald's, you would label that the exact same way right here. And then finally, the location that the employment actually took place, in this case, Worthington, Ohio. So again, just to highlight, we have the title of the position, right alignment, date of employment. We have the organization you represent, and then we have the location for which you actually worked. Now, as we're moving down, we're actually getting to the actual content now of that position, and this essentially is intended to speak to the experience that you had in this role. A key thing for making this successful and conveying information about your position is to make your experiences what I call actionable. So you want to convey, if at all possible, whatever action, whatever activity that you did, and in doing so, you're going to utilize action verbs at the beginning of these bullet pointed statements that you make describing your position. So for instance, this top example here indicates that this individual earned. Another example is promoted. Another example is served. Another example is engaged. So all of these are very, very intentionally crafted action verbs to show the action that took place in this specific role. And that's what employers want to see. They want to see that actual action took place while you were working. So as a full example here, this individual earned grade 12 youth soccer game official certification. So if this individual did something in terms of furthering their own professional development in a positive way, that's something important to convey, whether it's related to IT or not. So I think this is a really good example of something that could be included. Individual here listed promoted to grade 8 youth soccer official certification. So again, a promotion took place in this role, and that's something that is very interesting and important for employers to see. So that's a good articulation of that. And then another example is this individual served as center official and line official for youth soccer matches throughout the Ohio South Soccer District. So this particular bullet point shows the action that took place. They served as a center official. Center official, in my opinion, conveys a leadership role that this individual had. It shows they're competent in that type of context. And I think this is a really, really strong way of articulating that experience, as opposed to saying something like, refereed games. Refereed games shows absolutely nothing about what you actually did, versus a statement very strong like this is specific and robust and will be positively impactful when seen by our employer partners. Now, my recommendation for your work experience is whenever you list a work experience, you should have a minimum of 3 strong, robust bullet points with action verbs describing the experience that took place. So imagine somebody has no idea what a youth soccer game official entails or what a referee job entails. Imagine you're painting your position to that individual as clearly as possible, and that will help you be more specific. So you should have a minimum of 3 of these strong bullet points, and I would go even further than that. If you can include more, I would say the more the better, assuming it's actually relevant and it relates to your role. But have at least 3 strong bullets that relate to it. Now, after we've covered what I would consider the top 3 categories of your resume, that being education, computer and technical skills, and then work experience that you've had previously, then I think you enter this somewhat gray area of optional categories and things that you can include but don't necessarily have to. My recommendation is that you should, in any circumstance, have all of these categories included: education, computer and technical skills, and work experience. All IT students should have those 3. I would consider those mandatory. However, after those, I think you have some room for creativity, and it is your responsibility to paint yourself in the most positive light possible. So if you have significant leadership experience and you want to showcase that on your resume, that is a perfectly fine optional category to include. If you have extracurricular involvement in activities, perfectly fine optional thing to include, listed on there. If you've taken technical coursework, and most of you have, and you need to convey, or you want to convey, the courses that you've taken to a potential employer, you can list the technical coursework that you've had as well, and I think this is a good way to do it. So again, I'll go back up to leadership experience here as just one example. This individual was a fraternity sorority chapter developer, so they actually created a chapter of a fraternity / sorority on campus at the University of Cincinnati. So I've labeled this following the exact same format that I did with work experience above. So here's the title of whatever that leadership role was, the chapter developer. Again, right alignment in terms of dates that this occurred, the organization it represents, and the location. So it follows the exact same format that we did above with work experience. And then, using those action verbs again, describing that experience in a very strong and robust way. Moving down, extracurricular activities and involvement. This individual is involved in ITSA, so the Information Technology Student Association. This is a great professional development organization for all IT students, and if you're not involved in it, I recommend getting involved because it does stand out to our employers, and they like seeing those students that are really fully invested in furthering themselves professionally, and this is one association you can be a part of to do that. So we've listed ITSA, and again, right alignment in terms of dates that you've actually been a part of this. WIT, so the Women in Technology organization as well, you can list that. Again, right alignment in terms of dates. And then finally, we're getting to technical coursework and really conveying the classes that you've taken. You can almost directly look at the degree plan that you've had over the course of a couple different semesters now, and list those classes verbatim as they come across. So, for instance, Programming 1, Networking, Network Security, Web Development. Any of these are perfectly acceptable to include if you would like to have a technical coursework category, and employers will care about that. Now, these were just 3 examples: leadership experience, extracurricular involvement in activities, and then technical coursework. These are 3 examples of optional categories that you could include. However, again, my biggest recommendation to you is follow your same format throughout the document and include those optional categories that best play to your particular strengths, whatever those are, so you don't necessarily have to follow this perfectly. And then the final thing we added to this resume is just the availability that you have for a potential co-op. So for those searching for summer, this is an example. We've just listed very clearly available for summer 2015 co-op, May 4th to August 21st. Now recognize that this is 2015, so for those searching for 2016 or 2017, the dates of employment are different, and you can obtain those by visiting uc.edu/propel and clicking on the calendars link. It actually will clearly indicate what all of those dates are for the co-op term. You can also check with your co-op advisor or your instructor of your PD class as well. So this is an example of a strong IT resume that will help you be successful when it comes to your co-op job search. Again, aesthetically balancing the document. It is a single page. It doesn't push onto a second page. It follows the same format throughout in terms of font style, spacing, all of that. The content is very strong and robust. And then we've done a lot to really highlight specifically the computer and technical skills that you possess as a future IT professional. So this was one example. You don't have to prescribe to this entirely. If there are other examples you like, or if you have a different draft to your resume that follows a slightly different format, that's perfectly fine as well. I'll throw another couple examples up here. This is one where a student followed a very different format, but essentially the content is the same. This is perfectly acceptable as well if you want to go slightly different aesthetic layout, no problem. Here I'll try and show one more also. Here's another IT resume example. Again, format different in terms of header, in terms of structure, and the actual body of the document, but essentially the main points are conveyed the exact same way. So this has been a short tutorial on resume development, resume design for information technology students at the University of Cincinnati. If you have further questions, you can reach out to your co-op advisor or your instructor of your Introduction to Co-op course. Thank you for tuning in.